Welcome, readers and viewers. I am Alexis, and welcome back. Today, I have my wrap up from August. I'm a little behind in this, but here we go. So, August was the end of my summer and the start of a new school year, so it started strong and then kind of waned. The goals that I had, I wanted to read 3 books I owned, 3 arcs, and 3 books to help me with my writing. I am writing a novel in verse, but it's also dystopian, so those were the kinds of books I was looking for. Um, I did pretty good. I read 3 arcs, and I read 3 books to help me with my writing. I did not get 2 books I owned. So, I'll show you which ones I did read, but here are my stats. 4 audiobooks, 13 books by women, 10 books by authors of color, 1 non-US author who's Canadian, 3 graphic novels, 3 novels in verse, 8 young adult, 5 middle grade, and 5 adult, 10 published in 2022, 3 horror, 1 memoir, 10 realistic fiction, 3 fantasy, and 1 historical fiction. So I read 18 books. All right, here are the books I read. So the books I owned, the reason why I did a books I own goal is because I buy so many and I get distracted and read. I also get a lot of arcs, so I want to have a balance of reading, you know, making sure I read both, and staying focused. So the 2 books I owned were The Lincoln Highway and Last Night at the Telegraph Club, both adult, both fantastic. I mean, Amor Towles books are just so well developed. I loved Rules of Civility. I loved The Gentleman of Moscow. They're just great stories. And this one was during the Great Depression, which is one of my favorite times of history to read. And it was, kind of an adventure, um, driving across the US, a lot of interesting characters, really fantastic. Took a while, but was well worth it. And The Last Night at the Telegraph Club, no, sorry, that one is a young adult. And it's also historical, takes place in San Francisco in the 50s, I believe. And oh my gosh, just another fantastic read. Spans different generations. It kind of goes back and forth between the mom and the daughter. And it's all about just finding love, finding yourself, and it was beautiful. And just the 50s vibe was really cool. And San Francisco in the 50s was really cool. I really enjoyed that book a lot, and honestly, I may even read it again. It was really good. 3 arcs. Well, I read more than this, but the first 3 arcs I finished were Barani by Michelle Katarusman, and she is a Canadian author. Um, this book is perfect for fans, it's middle grade, fans of One and Only Ivan. Um, it has the orangutans point of view in it. It also has 2 kid point of views, and it's all about, standing up for what you believe in, making tough choices. Sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing. Um, and sometimes you have to think of others and your actions, how they impact other people. This one definitely is a activist book. I love when kids are activists, and this is it. It'll break your heart, though. Barani's chapters will break your heart. So grab your tissues. And then completely opposite is The Getaway by Lamar Giles. Oh my gosh. A horror book, dystopian, fantastic, kind of like Disney World as its own world in a I guess post-apocalyptic time, the rich people versus the poor, fighting injustice, so many twists and turns, and also multiple points of view. Amazing read, young adult. The tryout was something I was really excited about because I was a cheerleader in school, and there aren't many cheerleader books out there, or that I've come across, and so this one was fun, and it's a graphic novel by Christina Tornvant, and I'm sure said that wrong. And in the book, I mean, uh, she's such a fun character, and it's also illustrated by Joanna Cacao. Um, I hope I said that wrong, Cacao. Um, anyway, this was such a fun book about cheerleading, but also middle school and new friendships and that struggle of changing friendships in middle school, which I think is huge for kids. And it's hard, and finding new friends and knowing how to balance that, it all changes in middle school for kids. So I think this is a really important book. Not only is it about cheerleading, but it's very realistic, and it'll tug at your heart for sure. Um, the three books that helped me with my writing, these were three novels in verse, all fantastic. Lawless Spaces by Corey Ann Haydu, sorry. Um, that one is a young adult, and it was beautiful. It was told through poetry, but kind of like a journal. And these women in her family all have a journal to write their experiences in when they turn 16, and they all have similar experiences. And it's it's about women and how they're treated based on their bodies and their clothing and their looks, and it's a really important read, and I really am glad I found it because her style of poetry is pretty fantastic. Samira Serves is middle grade, and Roxana Guidrose, she wrote this one. It takes place in Bangladesh, I believe, and they're refugees. And this one touches on, refugees and losing your home, wondering where your loved ones are. Really sad. The violence and the racism. Um, well, I don't know if it's racism, but I mean it's definitely an ism. They're treated differently. The also inequality of girls. So, Samira wants to surf, and she's not allowed to because she's a girl. And there's a surf competition, and there's a lot of girls who are really good at surfing, but it's not allowed. The competition will let them in, but their family won't. And so changing their family's mind is a really good message. And I liked watching everyone change. There were a lot of characters who changed and in a lot of different ways. And I also liked how the communities all held each other together in this book and worked together. Um, really great messages in this story. And then Moonwalking, I'm so glad I stumbled upon this book. I hadn't seen it before. I don't know why it didn't cross my path. Zetta Elliott and Lynn Miller Lockman. It's a dual point of view novel in verse, and it's so one character, you can kind of tell on the cover, one character likes to draw and tag, and the other character is a kind of a more musical character. And they find a friendship um, in each other. It's in the 80s, I believe, and the style of poetry. Like, there's a lot of concrete poems. Each character has their own distinguished voice. It's not labeled, like each different point of view isn't labeled very well, but once you start reading, you definitely hear the different voices and you can pick them apart. At first, I stumbled, um, but then it was smooth. It was fine once I realized it was supposed to be dual point of view. Um, it's a really cool book and a lot of great messages and really important ones. And I really enjoyed I really loved Moonwalking. I'm actually gonna read it again for, my book club, or my writing critique group. We also have a book club kinda thing going on, and we're using it as a mentor text. I'm really excited to dive in again and really look for things I can use in my own writing. So other books I read, and they're not in any particular they're in the order that I finished. So I had been reading Age of Myth, and listening to it. It's a fantasy kind of Lord of the Rings style adventure. Unlikely friendships and groups come together. It was okay. Wasn't my favorite audiobook I've listened. I don't know if it was the audiobook or the book, but it was very long and it, yeah, it was hard to get through. And it may have just not been what I wanted right then. Also, Black Cake. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Multi-generational story about family. It all centers around a black cake that they make in the Caribbean, um, is where it comes from, and a mom of 2 siblings has died, and why isn't this letting me? Okay. She's passed away, and she left behind a recording of her explaining her life. And at the end, in it, she says she has cake for them in the freezer to eat when they know the time is right, and they'll know. A lot of secrets, a lot of discoveries, and the 2 siblings aren't close, and it, it's a really good story. But really, it's a tearjerker. Meet Me in the Margins was an audiobook for a book club, and it was super fun, cute romance, perfect for book people because it takes place in a publishing house. I really liked this book. It was just a fun read. I listened to it fast. It was an audiobook, great narrator. The Mary Shelley Club, another horror book, Goldie Moldavsky. Oh my gosh, amazing and super spooky. Reminded me of Scream, um, slasher. It's kind of like a group of kids with a common interest of horror come together and they actually do fear challenges and what happens when they go too far. And The Curse of the Night Witch, a fantasy by Alex Astor for middle grade. I listened to this book. It was a good narrator. I think I've listened to something by this person before, and or this narrator. It was a good fantasy adventure story, and I think kids would really like it. All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir is one that I will always think about. It's a young adult and deals with many things, very tough things in a teenager's life, but also a teenager with tough families, tragedy. Uh, it's a fantastic book. I really recommend that book. There are some trigger warnings in the, I think they list them in the beginning. Uh, Mira, the Tidebreaker was a graphic novel. I had been eyeing this book because I love the cover, Aquaman-ish kind of feel, and it definitely lived up to that. It was a very good, good Aquaman superhero book. And Mira is a princess and trying to kill an enemy's prince so she can win her father's favor. And yeah, loved love that book. And the illustrations were phenomenal. It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey is another romance audiobook. Um, Not something is very Hallmarky, um, in the sense that it's a rich woman who has to go to a small fishing town where she's out of place, um, but she finds love. But I did like it. I did like it. It was a good, entertaining read. Flamer by Mike Curato is such an important book. It's a graphic novel, young adult, and it's about his life, or well, his experience in Boy Scouts that summer that he kind of discovered about himself, and um, it struggles with his identity. It's really tough to read in some places, but it's a good tough to read, and that's a really important book, and I would definitely I'll be thinking about that book as well. I don't think I'll forget that book. It was pretty powerful. And then the last book I read in August was My Best Friend's Exorcism, another horror book, and it's very well, the cover is 80s, very 80s style, had media sprinkled in from the 80s, advertisements and images and commercials and things like that, which was really cool. And it had, obviously the typical like possession plot, and it's her best friend, and she's not herself, and she's trying to figure it out. And uh, the ending, oh my gosh, there were parts that were hard to read. It was definitely a horror book, but it was really good. So that's what I read for August, and I I'm really proud of myself for what I read, especially for starting school about halfway through the month. And I am very glad that I read a lot of women authors and authors of color. I did not read very many non-US authors, and so that's kind of something I want to focus on. I Canadian authors. I do have a publisher that sends me books, so just focusing on those a little bit more. Um, but I read a lot of 2022 books, so I think I did a pretty good job on reading things that I needed to. So I would love to hear what you read in August, what you want to read, if you've read any of these books, or if you have questions about any of them. Um, Leave a comment, and I'd love to hear from you. So make sure you like and subscribe, and thanks for tuning in. Happy reading.